against the blue, I'm sorry, standing against the map there from Bailey's Harbor. And Roger Kuhns standing against the blue wall, Doctor of Geology, and they put together this wonderful presentation to help to explain why we are so fortunate to have the Niagara Escarpment as the spine of Door County. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to do a little tag teaming here. It's an honor to be in front of the board, or where'd they go? And thank you very much for your time as well. I know that you have a lot to do, but Bob and I and many people here who have also been working hard on a lot of just bringing issues together so we can kind of multitask them is a big priority for us. And Bob and I have been working on a whole lot of aspects of the county and the townships for a long time. And one of the things that brings us here is the Niagara Escarpment. It is a fundamental feature of this county and of this region, and especially Liberty Grove, with the huge, one of the tallest cliffs in Wisconsin. And it is an influence on the geology and the hydrology, the ecology, and our communities. It brings people in as tourists, and a lot of people live on the cliff or the ledge, which has a shelf life, as a friend of ours has named it. And we're very interested in making sure that we integrate our understanding of this feature with our communities and our growth and our economy and how that all knits together, as well as how we move forward on policy and planning. We're very excited about the Liberty Grove Comprehensive Plan and things that you'll be doing this year. So it's our goal to present some of these things in this short time and have some question and answers afterwards. And the escarpment brings not only a wonderful natural beauty and a scientifically interesting thing, but it also gives us a sense of place. This thing, this sometimes intangible thing of why we like to be here. And sometimes we grow very used to it, and other times we say, you know, I think I'm just going to stand by the oldest forest in Wisconsin, which happens to be on the cliff. And we might not have known that a while ago, but as we look about how our land use planning is going, we now know that. It is a place where we live and visit, work, recreate, and educate ourselves and our children, and also try to preserve it and integrate it into our living space, which is really no simple task. One key example of an opportunity to apply our understanding of the science of the escarpment and something we'll talk about today is sustainability are some of the decisions we make on how to manage our roads. So one of the things that we want to touch on is something like the Garrett Bay Road, and in the 2003 Liberty Grove Comprehensive Plan, it says in Chapter 4, in examining the design of town roads, the roadscape of these facilities should be considered as well. It's not just a roadscape, that's the outward beauty that we see. It's actually part of the ecosystem of the Niagara Escarpment. And this is something that we want to better understand. So we, Bob and I, and those we work with, urge that the scenic roads not be aggressively improved or widened at the expense of some of the scenic location-defining trees and rock outcroppings. These natural features, and we also see that on the winding section of Highway 42 out to Northport, as well as Garrett Bay Road, and many other roads in the county. These are part of the Niagara Escarpment's extended ecosystem, and it offers an important sense of place. We associate this place with its beauty. I really am proud of the people that serve on the boards in Door County, Liberty Grove, all of this. To me, this kind of public service can be daunting. It takes a lot of homework. It takes a lot of time. And I really, I want you to know that I really appreciate what you guys do. And I'm really happy about some of the committees you have here in Liberty Grove. I've listed them, some of them on a handout. A couple key ones, I mean, the Highway Committee is obviously a very important one because that's a group we're talking to in terms of how we manage these roads. But also we have the Niagara Escarpment Interpretive Center Committee that's new, and that can have a profound effect on who comes to Liberty Grove and quality of life down the road, not just for us in this room, but for our children and grandchildren and generations to come. As geologists, we see time long term, and so we want to stress that. Did we have? There we go. Okay. So we can see the Niagara Escarpment from space, and one of the avenues that we look at in trying to manage something that's amazing in the context of our communities and the economies of those communities is sustainability. Sustainability is the integration of understanding the environment, the community, and the economy. Nature has a lot of economics. Nature has a lot of communities. We are part of nature. So this is not an esoteric thing at all. It's actually something that we're doing all around the world, huge impact on many parts of the United States. I have a home in Egg Harbor, and so this has a profound impact on me and how we all behave and do that. So sustainability is the active and aggressive preservation and improvement of the environment, the active improvement of our communities and quality of life, and doing so in a very environmentally and economically positive way. So we know we have to have jobs and make money. We have tax structures, we have all these things. This is a key part of sustainability. You can't do sustainability unless we can afford to do it. It's not a luxury, okay? So how do we do this? How do we apply sustainability in the Niagara Escarpment, something like this, to something like our town? And first, as I said before, I want to recognize what you guys have done. These steps, whether they're big or little, are really important steps because they get you moving forward, and guess who's watching? All of our children, and in some cases grandchildren. And I have my kids who, grew up climbing the rock fences of Door County. They say, "How's it going there, Dad?" Now they don't live here because they've sought jobs elsewhere, but they remember this place. So a big part of this is we start with sustainable land use planning and the inclusion of sustainable practices that reduce the impacts of the environment, reduce the use of energy, and reduce the aggressive maintenance of natural and scenic areas. In essence, we're saying, let's call upon nature to help us maintain things, because it's been doing it for billions of years. And that costs us less money in our community, so we can use that money for other things. Sustainable practices also open our eyes to natural viewscape preservation and help us understand the broader sense of place here in the county and in the town. The inclusion of these practices in the Liberty Grove Comprehensive Plan, we feel, is a critical step. And we're here to offer our help, however you would like to use that help. So the Niagara Escarpment provides a cornerstone of a sense of place for us in Door County. And what Bob's going to do now is he's going to tell you a little bit about the escarpment, and take it away.
As many of you know, the Niagara Escarpment is an internationally significant feature. This physiogeographic feature extends for well over 450 miles from Wisconsin. You kind of see from this aerial photo the general lay of where the main corridor cliffs are. It stretches through part of the UP, island hops over to Ontario, where it's expressed as the Bruce Peninsula. So when you look at a map of the Great Lakes, the Door Peninsula and the Bruce Peninsula are mirror images of each other. You can follow the escarpment corridor down through southern Ontario, where it crosses at Niagara Falls back into the United States and thus into western New York State. It's been designated a World Heritage Site in Canada, and it's a major draw for tourism, significantly helping local economies through geological and ecological tourism. You may have heard the terms geotourism and ecotourism. Those are things that we're beginning to hear a lot more about and are being talked about in conferences that are having a conference just on ecotourism. So these are things that will definitely benefit us in the long run. The Niagara Escarpment is part of a widely connected group of ecosystems that provide the diversity and habitats of our green space. From the cliff faces to the forests above and below and the wetlands, definitely all things are connected. These ecosystems manage, store, and clean our surface and drinking water, especially in this karst and sinkhole-rich environment. I think that's another topic that hopefully people are becoming more and more familiar with, about how fragile our drinking water situation is here. And it has everything to do with the Niagara Escarpment. These ecosystems help clean our air and buffer noise. And they provide migratory bird feeding and sanctuary areas. These ecosystems are the focus of ecological and geological tourism, recreation, scientific study, all of which bring important economic inputs to Liberty Grove and to Door County. By actively protecting the Niagara Escarpment and helping spread the word on how it is connected to all things here, Liberty Grove will stand as an example for all of Door County and for other parts in Wisconsin that enjoy the presence of this unique environment. We will also gain the benefits of its preservation through increased tourism dollars and important steps towards sustainable communities. The one thing that I always like to compare, again, talking to about the Bruce Peninsula, at the tip of the Bruce Peninsula, they have a national park. And again, we're basically a mirror image, so think about that. We're basically living in or around a national park, right here, right outside our door. This is a national park. So to me, that influences and speaks to how we manage this place. And we're not alone. There's a lot of help out there, and there's people who are either have studied these things or have come to find their passion in different aspects of the escarpment. And there's a group called the Niagara Escarpment Resource Network right here in Wisconsin that meets every couple months. And they're a fantastic association of scientists, policymakers, business people, and escarpment enthusiasts that provide a focus for information and resources on science, communities, businesses, and policies. We urge you to become members of NERN and follow, get on their email list, and become members and keep the escarpment in the forefront of your thinking as you develop policies here in the town of Liberty Grove and in Door County. And even more locally, the vision of bringing a Niagara Escarpment Interpretive Center to Door County, to Liberty Grove Township, is a very important effort. This small and sustainable building in the town of Liberty Grove will go a long way to connecting us to the national and international awareness of places like the Niagara Escarpment. And it's definitely a very laudable goal, and I'm very proud to be part of that committee and that effort.
So let's zero in a little bit. Let's look a little closer at this habitat and why two scientists and a bunch of naturalists in the room and people in the county and visitors too come and look at this thing. This is amazing. This is really an amazing place. When you think of the Niagara Escarpment, many people just think of the cliff. This is anything but just a cliff. So one of the things, Bob and I have known each other for a long time, and way back when he was in, when I had hair, he and I were sitting in a coffee shop, and he said, it's not just a cliff, it's a zone, it's a corridor, it's an area. How do we define this? How do we get this point across to people? And so one of the things is to really understand the detail and then step out and get a larger view. What we've just done is we look from space at the huge extent of the escarpment, and as we look up here, we see the cliff. Now on that cliff is a forest. It's actually the oldest forest in Wisconsin, because the oldest forest that was here has been cut. So some of these trees are anywhere, the oldest tree seen on the escarpment is about 1,700 years old. But there's a lot of 1,000-year-old trees and 800-year-old trees on this cliff forest. It's a cliff with some trees, cedar trees that cling to life by growing amazingly twisted and gnarled roots on there. Below the cliff, we have a thing called the algific zone. This is about this wide. This is usually where somebody might make a footpath at the base of the cliff. And in doing so, we actually destroy a habitat. because it relies on the water and the air flowing through the fractures from on top, where we are now, down to the base of the cliff, and keeping a cool ice age-like environment that you normally see way up in Canada. Below that, we have the talus slope, on which we find alkaline shorelines when you don't have a forest, and we see the shoreline forests, and we see wetlands along there. Then if we go back up on the cliff and go behind it, we have the forest up on top. We also have these very fragile habitats called olivars. These are seasonal little wet patches where we see rare and endangered, in some cases endangered plants. As we go away from the cliff, if that wall is the cliff and I'm walking towards you and your house is over here and our town is over here, we are actually still in the influence of the ecosystems of the Niagara Escarpment. This is a really important thing that for many years was not well understood by even ecologists. And so one of the things we realize is we're very familiar with these forests. We've cut them, we've built our towns out of them, we live in them, we drive through them, we hike through them, and they've survived amazing odds. They're at risk with invasive species, from insects as well, and from development. So when we talk about sustainability and the escarpment ecosystems that extend for thousands and thousands of feet away from the cliff into the county, across the township, this is an understanding of how everything is connected, okay? So with this knowledge, we start talking about the Niagara Escarpment Zone. So if we look, next one. If we look at the escarpment as it migrates or runs up the Green Bay side of the peninsula, you can see the cliff or the ledge in red, and then the bays in yellow. Okay, next one. Here's all the locations, which you all know very well. The next one. Now, one of the things I've been working on for a long time is understanding the geologic controls of our ecosystems that guide our agriculture and where we put our towns in Door County. And one of the things that defines Door County are these big red northwest-southeast trending fractures. All of our bays, System Bay is on one. Ellison Bay is on one. And if we follow them across the peninsula, we run into other bays, from Egg Harbor over to Whitefish Dunes, and the Ridges Sanctuary up, and so on, Rowley's Bay to Ellison Bluffs and things like that. This connects the east and the west sides of the escarpment structurally through geology. Isn't geology cool? So, what else does that then guide? Next slide. Well, this is an aerophoto, which you can buy in the tourist shops here. It's a really handy thing to drive around and make marks on. And you can see some green stripes that follow where those red fractures were. So, this is a map in red of protected areas in the county. The Land Conservancy, the county parks, stuff like this. Really places that we want to say we really enjoy. We see a lot of coastal preservation, not a whole lot in the middle, but where we see it is often along these fractures, because those are lows, those are old river valleys that before Green Bay existed and the glaciers were here, the rivers flowed from northwest to southeast, cut valleys across this part of the country, and then they were stranded when the glaciers came through and made Green Bay. So we connect our bays with the structures in the Dolomite that have wetlands on them that aren't good for agriculture because they're too wet. And we save those areas because they're easy to save. In the meantime, we cut the other areas because there's forests there, because they're drier, and we build our homes there and our farms there. There's a lot of good stuff that's happening here, and what we want to do is not second guess what we did in the past, but look forward with sustainable eyes and say, how can we take what we know now and build on it and make a Door County and a township that will be wonderful to come to and live in for hundreds of years. Hundreds of years. Next slide. So this is just a little snapshot. If we zoom in a little bit, next one, and we can see Ephraim and Bailey's Harbor, and you see the green patches of wetland in between. The next one, we can see the Niagara Escarpment peeking out at the top, and the fractures. Okay. So what does this mean? Does this matter to us at all? Next slide. Next slide. And there we go. So now we see significant natural areas in green. We see how they're aligned with geology. They are almost exclusive of agriculture, although in some cases, some of the farms have not been able to make money anymore, and those are slowly going back to forests or prairies. This place never had a lot of prairies in the first place, but it's a natural succession. So we have all of this happening here, and this shows us that these ecosystems are all connected. So how wide is the Niagara Escarpment Resource Zone? Well, in this picture, it extends almost all the way to the other side of the peninsula. These ecosystems are connected. When you impact one, you impact the next one, and the next one, and the next one. That make sense? This is a really important thing because here in Liberty Grove, you have the east and the west and the north side of this peninsula. It's unique. There's nothing like it. It's different, similar to, but different than the Bruce Peninsula. Because you don't say A, you're going to have gravy on everything. So with this knowledge, I used to work up there, eh? So with this knowledge, we can now understand that when we talk about how to maintain a road, or how big should we build a house and how many trees should we cut, we're really making a decision that has huge ramifications. And so that's our request to you, is that you consider sustainability in planning. With this in mind, the sustainability, which is the environment, the community, and the economy, okay? With these things in mind, let's look at some examples. And Bob's going to talk a little bit about forest management and sustainability in that regard, and I'll be back in a minute.
Yeah, we're going to talk a couple of examples of sustainable management, and one of those is in sustainable forestry. This map here is from the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Wildlife Action Plan, and it kind of goes to the point I made before about being globally significant. The dark green areas on that map are recognized as globally significant habitat. And when you look, you can actually go online and look at this map for the entire state, and they rank it by state significant. I think it's state significant, upper Midwest, continental significance, and then global significance. And look at how much of Door County is globally significant habitat. So again, we are definitely part of something really special. And again, that's globally significant for the high number of rare and endangered plants and animals that live in these areas. And one way to address those special areas and those special fragile habitats and fragile species, plants and animals that live in these areas, is to look at sustainable forestry management practices. The Liberty Grove Comprehensive Plan states woodlands provide an aesthetic and natural purpose, and the town encourages responsible tree removal. These are good ideas. Definitely should be expanded upon. The town of Liberty Grove forests have seen multiple timbering episodes, the occasional fire, and some clearing for farming and housing development. Invasive insects are killing off parts of our forest, even now threatening some tree species such as the ash and the beech. And I don't know how much you know about trees, but percentage-wise, ash makes up a huge percent of our forest, and the emerald ash borer is getting closer. It has not been detected in Door County yet, but it is in Green Bay, and it's on the Garden Peninsula. So it's coming close. And ash trees are experiencing dieback of over 90%. And Wisconsin has like 700 million ash trees in the state. Again, often a very high percentage of our trees. Many of our trees in our parks and on our roadways, ash is a very popular street tree or yard tree. And then the beech are already experiencing beech bark disease. We're losing all of our large beech trees, also experiencing diebacks of approximately 90%. Within the next 10 years, you're not going to see any beech trees this big anymore. All of them, and that disease is now throughout the county and spreading all up and down eastern Wisconsin. Unfortunately, that's a small aphid, and it just blows on the wind. So there's no stopping that, and as far as I know, no treatment either. And so again, I mean, there are sections of our forests that are 20 or 25% beech trees. When you start talking about removing a quarter of the forest canopy, you're talking about a cascade of effects that are going to have implications for the regeneration and the sustainability of those forests. And that's just nature at work, things that are going to be out of our control. So it kind of behooves us, I think, to take a little bit more caution than we used to, because we don't know. And like Roger said, we need to look forward with what we know and with sustainable eyes to try to understand and manage these systems. Sustainable forest management seeks biodiversity and community enrichment. Sustainable practices would urge limited tree cutting and allow naturally dying or windfall trees to remain in the forest as part of the natural nutrient recycling and habitat creation, and using sustainable land use practices as a guide for construction and maintenance activities as well. Another example is sustainable land use planning. It affects how we manage our roads, agricultural lands, and built spaces. For example, some of the winding near escarpment roads can be maintained as scenic or heritage roads and linked to the preservation efforts of the Niagara Escarpment. Again, mentioning NERN, there's an effort along the entire corridor in Wisconsin to identify these very special places, whether they're trails or just a road to bike on or roads, you know, they're starting to come up with, the overall plan is called the Greenway Plan. And just looking at where are the corridors, where are the links, where are the connections, where are the museums, where are the galleries, where are the restaurants, where are the vineyards, and linking all these. And so these canopy tree-covered roads are an important part of that linkage, and definitely lend itself to an appreciation of a sense of place. Again, Mother Nature is doing a lot of work that's out of our control, removing these canopied roads anyway. We don't have to be too aggressive about it. As we mentioned, the escarpment and how we live on the land are all interconnected. Therefore, sustainable land use planning, as applied to roads, would seek to minimize tree cutting and to understand natural forest diversity and succession. Scenic roads such as Garrett Bay Road become an important destination for visitors and further develop the uniqueness and sense of place here in the township of Liberty Road. Along these same lines, sustainable land use planning applies to construction activities. Remembering the importance and uniqueness of the forests and wetlands, we would strive to limit impacts to them caused by development projects. Some ways of achieving this are to restrict clear cutting and mass grading of sites, and recommend smaller building sizes when possible, utilize repurposed and recycled materials, and call upon sustainable building guides such as LEED, the Leadership in Environmental and Engineering Design, and the greater use of renewable energy. Roger's got one more example.
These pictures are on Janet's computer, so anybody that wants to, and so the board can have access to all of these, because I know this might be kind of small to see. We weren't sure how big it was going to be projected. In long-term planning, from what Bob just said then, we call upon sustainable practices. And sustainability, again, is enriching the environment, promoting and enriching the community, and doing so in an economically feasible way. 10 years ago, everybody would say this is impossible. I actually have my own company that does this with clients, and it actually is less expensive than traditional approaches to land management now. It wasn't 20 years ago, but today it is. So one of the things we can do is we can look at a project, such as how you might put a maintenance program together, or build a Niagara Escarpment interpretive center, or approve a housing project, something like this. And you might say, well, how can we actually integrate sustainable practices into this? And this is where we work together, okay? And one of the things we do is we use the sustainability metrics, the environment, the community, and the economy as a filter to make sure we're actually improving these things and doing them cost effective. Then we look at at first, the old design build plan, which would usually be what a master plan is, and this becomes a subset of a sustainability master plan. This has things like, how are we going to design the building so it uses less energy and takes up less space and has a lower impact on the environment and costs a little less money to operate, okay? Operating costs usually kill you more than the capital cost of building, okay? To do so, if you don't know anything about this, you can go to LEED, as Bob said, and this is a checklist of how to do good stuff, okay? There are LEED certified architects in Door County. It's a great thing. We also then build them with renewable and low impact materials. Then, let's go to the top thing, the land stewardship. If it's a brownfield site, that is a site that has been built on before and impacted, we might want to restore it or remediate it. That is, clean up the mess and reuse it, rather than go to a greenfield site like a recovering agricultural field or a forest and cut that stuff down. So one of the things that can be in a comprehensive plan is the active identification and promotion of rebuilding on brownfield sites, okay? This means it's a no-brainer. You don't have to cut the trees, okay? And we're doing this all over the place. Then we look at the restoration and remediation, which can occur on a house site or a business site or a community center site or some municipal building site as well, okay? Enveloped in that then is an interpretive master plan. This helps everybody understand what you're doing and make sure that you catalog the legacy of your progress using sustainability in your land use planning. It becomes an educational tool for the schools, so your kids and grandkids can now say, yeah, you know what Grandpa did? He just built a LEED building. Wow, you know? I've actually heard this from kids in community meetings. It's really exciting to hear. So this allows you to have something to pass on to educate other people, and one of the most important groups in our community to educate, and they're willing to do this because many of them are already doing this, is to use these practices that you have introduced them to that grow their business. That is, if a design build company contractor here in Door County wants to build more buildings because the recession is over and we're in the recovery and housing starts are going up, are we going to do it the same way we did before? Or are we going to use sustainable practices? This is where our policies in county and town governments can be a shining, guiding light. It's really, really important. And that's where your job becomes harder, I should say. Because it's something that if we don't do this, I'm an economic geologist. We are running out of natural resources. And that's not like in the long term. Some things that we use to run civilization, we have less than a 10-year life on, okay? So this is actually an imperative. If we want the quality of life of our children and grandchildren to be as good as our quality of life. So that's the sustainability pitch and how we apply it to our policies and our maintenance and our building. And the Niagara Escarpment is a great focus engine for this. Thanks very much. Any questions? Okay. Yeah.
Well, as always, I mean, that's really impressive. Thank God. Recently, don't talk because the devil is always in it. So we're sitting here, we use wood, 3, not sincerely, but we're something. Limited trees. Don't cut standing trees. So, if you want to cut beech trees, cut ash trees, don't use a wood burning stone. I mean, what's the detail?
The detail is when you think about the forest that you're cutting the trees from, how is it doing? Every forest can sustain a certain amount of wood removal. Every forest can do that when it's healthy. It's when we go in and clear out all the undergrowth and we change the soil moisture and start erosion and things like this that we start having problems. So do you want to address some of the things, because we all like to burn wood, actually, it's a,
Yeah, it's a local
especially up
sustainable
here.
product,
Yeah. Yeah.
If you have beech, that's gonna become much more available, or if you have it, I mean, that's obviously something to watch. I mean, those are the trees that are gonna be dying now in great numbers. And again, you know, they're not expecting us to have beech trees much bigger than, you know, kinda like Dutch elm trees.
12 years
All the
old.
big ones died, and you get elm trees growing, and every once in a while one gets kinda big, but they usually succumb. And beech trees are expected to kind of have the same sort of, you know, and that being said too, you know, depending on what your parcel is, what is the makeup of the trees? You know, what are your, you know, what's, you know, your canopy trees, how many are ash, how many are beech, how many are pine, how many are maple, and on down the line. And if you have a lot of ash, you may consider start harvesting those, some of them, so that other things start growing. So that you don't one day, you know, because once the disease comes, then things, you kind of goes through that quick decline, where then you lose all of the same, you know, all your large trees of that species. So, I mean, those are things to
So
think
you
about.
want to actively plant trees, not just wait for them to
So
die.
what kind of trees?
Or encourage, I mean, diversity. I mean, you know, they're, again, hopefully into the future, you know, we may not be alive to see it, but hopefully beech will find the genetic resistance, and they'll, you know, we'll see large beech trees again. But, you know, it's still in your best interest to have a native forest. There's a lot of talk about that now with climate change, and the zones, you know, the agricultural zones, the planting zones, you know, the frost zones are moving north. And so some people are arguing, well, maybe we should be planting trees that typically grow a little further south. These are ongoing debates. But for what we have, the best thing you can do to keep your forest intact is to encourage the conifers. All of your conifer trees shade the ground 365 days a year. They keep the snow on the ground longer, they keep moisture on the ground longer, and that's what's going to benefit every aspect of this ecosystem. That's what this was. This was a predominantly conifer forest before the stars came and cut it off the first time. So a lot of it's recovered and recovering, but you can encourage it by making selections for those conifers. If you have a tree choice and you have a tree that's towering over a hemlock or a, you know, a spruce or a pine, maybe you want to kick that other tree for firewood and let those conifers grow. So, and again, diversity is really the key, is the best answer for that.
Yeah.
Is there somebody like from UW Extension that you could call and have them come in and take a look at what you have?
Are you talking about forestry?
Yeah.
I mean, I do that, but also that's what our foresters are here for too. And they're the DNR foresters, Bill Ruff and Chris Polzak.
So you could call them and request that they come in and take a look at your property, recommend what to do.
That is exactly their
as far as
job.
management.
Yep.
And if you get stuck, call us. I
Yeah.
mean, we do a lot of this stuff too, because sustainability is not just how am I going to get a piece of wood to burn a fire so I don't freeze in the middle of winter. It's how am I going to do this for a long, long time
And keep the forest
and not
healthy.
run out.
And the foresters, you know, the foresters are definitely evolving too. I mean, you know, I certainly have some critiques, but, you know, there wasn't that long ago that all the forester knew how to do was create timber. And all he would tell you was, this is how you're gonna get the most timber that you can come in and cut. Well, that's not the main purpose of a forest. So we wanna, you know, and especially to keep a forest sustainable and long-term, we definitely are, you know, the foresters are evolving their notions as well and their education, and, you know, all these ideas are, you know, percolating up, you know, through the educational system as well, and the agencies and the policies.
And our phone numbers are on the handout. And the board is, you know, knows everybody up here anyway, so there's a lot of, you know, seek local help. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
Two questions related to trees. One is, if you have trees that are dead or dying like at the edge of a road, but are not dangerously about to fall on a car or a person, what would be your recommendation? I know there's the idea of keeping them there for wildlife to use, but then that, I'd like you to just, you know, talk about that in a minute, but can you be more specific about how maintaining and preserving trees in the zone of the escarpment helps the health of the escarpment to survive?
I'll take that one.
I'll do the first, yeah, let me do the first one. You know, you always have to make a judgment call on tree safety, and if it's a dead tree and it's near your house or near the road, shut it down. I mean, not always right away. It does depend. If you're really good, you know the different types of trees and how they die. Beech trees, as soon as they're dead, cut them down. There is no integrity in that tree once it's dead. You know, other species will stand longer. In fact, some of those cedars that are clinging on the cliff out there, they've probably been dead for 500 years. I mean, that's, you know, cedars are capable of amazing things. So, but you definitely need to be prudent about, you know, near areas where people are gonna be, and, because you never know, even if it's leaning away, you know, a windstorm or something could change that, and, I mean.
But you may just drop it in the forest and leave it there.
Yeah,
See,
yeah.
that's because it depends on, again, on, you know, what's happening with that forest management, what the locals' wood needs are for heating and other uses. Some of the trees are actually pretty good to cut up into boards and build something out of.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have those choices, and that's why you have to look at that forest and make a forest plan. And your other question about the importance of keeping these trees in there, one of the most interesting things that happened in the 60s, 70s, and 80s that came out of the 50s with the development of urbanized, the urban areas around cities, is that a forest didn't have anything but grass on the ground. And so a whole lot of city people believe that I should be able to see through a forest. There shouldn't be anything there. And so there's a tendency to clear things out and remove the subcanopy and the forbs and the shrubs that are here, 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 and here. All of these things together hold the soil, keep soil moisture in, allow the microbes in the soil to do their job, breaking down minerals for nutrients, breaking down deadfall for nutrients, converting atmospheric nitrogen to usable nitrogen in the plants. The fungi, the mycorrhizae all do that. It's like a factory, okay? It's actively feeding everybody all the time. And what we do is we come in and we say, I need a few trees for my firewood, and the forest says, yep, I can manage that just fine if you don't take too many. But if you clear too much off, the soil dries out, the microbes start dying or changing, it opens it to invasive species. Once you start drying things out, cracks develop, you get erosion, runoff, contamination. We have lost in many parts of Door County, do you know how much surface soil we have lost? In some places, I have measured this much. Now, I'm you know, a handsome, rugged 7 feet tall, right? The thing is, we've lost 4, 5, 6, 7 feet of topsoil due to the early lack of understanding of land use management in a sustainable way.
I mean, over the last 100 years?
150 years, since settlement. Yep.
7 feet of topsoil.
In some places, yeah. Especially at the edges of fields where it goes into the drainage. Especially around sinkholes, right? So we don't have a whole lot of topsoil up here to spare, okay? So in some places where it's only this thick and you lose 50% of it, that's pretty serious. So that's what the trees and the forbs and the shrubs and the subcanopy all do. So it's very important to let this stuff keep going. And that's a sustainable forest management plan.
And not that you can't intervene, I mean, there are cases where the best practice to restore a forest back to its old growth status. And the old growth status is stable state. That's what it was doing for thousands of years, and that's where it's the most productive and the most sustainable and provides habitat for the widest variety of plants and animals. And sometimes some thinning or cutting is needed to, or could encourage, not that, you know, you wouldn't have, nature will do it eventually, but you can sometimes speed it up a little bit by doing some proactive management, but that's again getting into sustainable forestry practices. I mean, we do. I want to eat on a wood table. I don't heat my house with wood. I wish I could, or we all use these products. We write on paper all the time, and we're still a silly society that makes paper out of trees. I don't know why we're doing that, but we use trees all the time, so we need to use them wisely.
Yes.
I'm just wondering, what's the next step in the development of this master plan? Do you work with the board? Do you work with the
We
board?
could.
I mean, to really put that together.
Right. And this is not an ad for us to get
No,
work,
but I mean, it seems like it has to be something formal.
Right, and the thing is, there's other people in Door County that can do this, okay? Now, you can go far afield to many states and pull people in too, but I would encourage the fostering of using local businesses and building your teams to do this kind of thing with local businesses, you know, county and Wisconsin type scale stuff. And, you know, there's some architects in Sturgeon Bay and down south of Egg Harbor that are LEED certified that understand these things. And so, and we have been doing it for a long time. And so the next step is when you look at that, for instance, the comprehensive plan, you say, okay, this plan ideally guides policy because we're going to say the community needs this to have a high quality of life. There's something that is beginning to be really understood with communities. The old belief, I would say, is that a community to stay strong has to constantly grow. All right? And that's actually impossible in Door County because we have tourism only half of the year, basically. So half of the time, your town is going to be a ghost town, which we see in parts of our towns, don't we? I mean, if you've ever driven up the county in the middle of winter looking for an open restaurant, man, it's a sad thing. And that's because we don't have a sustainable community. Okay? So what you do is you understand how do you keep the young people in the county so they can have a high quality of life? Because they need to have jobs, they want to get married and have kids and, you know, so on and so forth. When we have this disrupted economy that we have now, and it's nobody's fault, it's just happened, you know, we can fix this. And so what we do is we sit down with the city planners or the county planners, the town planners, and we start laying out how do we look at the land use? How do we look at how this town actually is going to be sustainable, which doesn't necessarily mean growing bigger? How do we make sure we have jobs for local young people? How do we actually do that? So what we do is we map out that plan, and you look at business plans, you look at how you can take an existing plumbing company, for instance, and the one I use in Egg Harbor, boy, they're doing all sorts of cool stuff, you know? And they're learning. I mean, I was over in Bailey's Harbor talking to the hardware stores. And says, you know, if you guys order these parts and have them in your store, and somebody comes in to put a solar passive water heating system, they can buy it off the shelf. And they went, oh yeah, we never thought of that. Because what they've done then is they've gotten a new clientele, they've expanded their business, and they've enlarged their expertise. See? And that's a sustainable practice.
But who's going to instigate this plan?
This is driven by you as a citizen and a resident, and by the policymakers. Yeah, yeah.
Roger, a few years ago, Jack Travis, a few years ago, the state had a smart growth plan, and Liberty Grove was one of the first to get involved with smart growth. And in this room, there were about 120 people came for a session that was organized by the Northeast Regional Planning Commission, and we had a round-robin discussion and put on everything that people were wanting to see. And many of the things that you're saying right now was put on a bulletin board of what should be done. People accepted it then, and I was on the land use subcommittee, and we tried to write the land use subcommittee with those ideas in mind. I don't know what's in the land use plan now because everybody can, well, this is my property, I want to do whatever I want. And I think the plan commission says, well, okay, and so I don't know what the status is of the plan now for smart growth, but it was attacked, it wasn't attacked, it was tried a few years ago.
It's hard,
It's hard.
Jack, it's really hard. I'm not gonna, having been a policymaker for a short time and working with many towns, it's really hard. The thing is, it takes courage, it takes insight, it takes vision, and it takes teamwork. You can't do this by yourself. You can't have the rogue sustainability guy going, ah, ah, ah. You know, it takes everybody doing this. You've got to want to do this. And the problem that I see when I go into a community, the challenge, is that we, as animals, you know, in nature, think, where's my dinner coming from? Where am I going to sleep at night? Are there any dangerous saber-toothed tigers chasing me? I mean, stuff like this. We tend not to think you know, am I gonna be able to afford to heat my house in 2021 when fuel could be, you know, 30 bucks a gallon? Okay, and you're on a fixed income maybe? This is starting to look kind of scary, okay? Is that gonna happen? I have no idea. I can't see the future. But what I can do as a sustainable person and a geologist who studied resources is I can see the trends. And the trends tell us we have to be aware of this for the longer term. And so you keep trying, Jack. If you don't do it the first time, you just never give up. And you know, bring everybody on board, and sooner or later somebody will say, I'm really terrified to pass this because it's going to mean we don't have any houses bigger than 2,000 square feet because they're cheaper to heat with energy and everything, but let's put it in the ordinance. Yeah.
I think that, you know, the important thing, again, it is up to you. I mean, this is your town, and the town is gonna be what you make it. The comprehensive plan is a living document, and it's built in to be reviewed, and get involved.
Yeah.
I live in Jacksonport. My name is Mary Beth, and I am turning 30 this year. And everybody I know from my grade and my high school is getting married and having kids, and they're talking about where they want to live and what they want to do. And a lot of my friends would really love to live in Door County and work here. And a big problem for us is that housing is not affordable. They keep building condos that don't help us at all, and they're not energy efficient. They haven't taken into account any of these sustainable practices because of the time period in which they were built. We weren't looking forward enough. And I think it's really important if we're going to keep young people here and keep them off of unemployment all winter long, like many people I know, to have sustainable housing units for younger people that are more affordable and smaller. General family size is going smaller and smaller. All my friends want 1 or 2 kids, not 5 or 6 or 7. We're not necessarily running farms, but the cost of living has just skyrocketed. And if there's anything, you know, you can recommend to somebody my age who is perhaps renting a lake house and has issues with insulating because it's an old building from the 50s, or heating because we're working on natural gas and we don't have the option of wood stoves. Is there anything else that you can suggest for us to do to help that situation?
That's a long chat, but
Sorry.
in short, first of all, I think it's really important to recognize that people do want to stay here. And the second thing is, don't let it overwhelm you. You can't fix the world yourself, but what you can do is look at your life and say, you know, I can choose to buy local food. I can choose to buy local organic food, which means I'm probably going to be healthier later, which will reduce my health bill. I can probably start saving and look at state subsidies and, you know, tell Madison that we want to keep some of these subsidies until the balance between fossil fuels and renewable energy is really a balance, because it's still not at all. And there's also a lot of things you can do in just your lifestyle in terms of how you manage a house and how you grow food in your backyard if you have a yard, and how you partner with your neighbor if you need to share land. Community gardens are a big thing all around the United States now. And so there are things that when you sit down at night you say, okay, what can I afford on a fixed income as a 30-year-old person that's not going to scare me to death? And it might be things like, well, this next year, let's plant, if we've got, say, an area of 150 feet by 75 feet in the backyard, let's fill that full of vegetables. So I'm going to grow these vegetables, and they're going to be local from my yard, and that's going to reduce my food bill that year. So there's some things that you can start on a local level, and then as you get bigger and have county support and town support, you can start getting onto these renewable energy things. Yeah.
And I would add one more thing to that list of excellent suggestions. Get involved.
Yeah.
Get involved in your community, because ultimately the ordinances and the laws and the policies are made by you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roger.
There are more handouts if you didn't get one.